Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I want to talk to you about career, and more importantly, career transitions. These are gems that I got from Helen Tupper. She runs the company called Amazing If, and she ran Ali through these different questions, these exercises I thought were fascinating, and I got a ton of takeaways. Thinking about myself, I'm transitioning currently at this point in my career. I thought these might be helpful for you as well. So without further ado, let's jump into it. The first point that Helen talks about is this idea of reflecting in highs and lows. And before you say, okay, Kia, yeah, we get it, we got to reflect, blah, blah, blah. I think that Helen had a really interesting take on this because it wasn't just what do I like, what did I not? What Helen recommends is the way to frame this is think about all the jobs you ever had in your life, no matter what the work was, under the table, on the table. Think about your jobs. What did you like about them? It's not binary. Did I like it or did I not? Break it down. What did you like? What didn't you like? Here are different categories, some ideas to kind of get the gears turning. She recommended, I thought was interesting. 1, were you working with a lot of people or by yourself? 2, how much of your time was spent like in conferences, meetings, or working independently? Because some people really like collaboration, others don't. Some people like to work in big groups, others don't. These things I thought were really fascinating and just helpful when thinking about my own jobs. 3, how much time did you spend in the office? How much of the time did you spend alone? And I know that these all sound like they kind of have the same pieces to them, but if you really break it down, it comes to like if you're an extrovert, if you're an introvert, how much you like to work with people, how much you don't. It also, I think, comes down to hours. Were you working really long hours? Was it pretty easy? Did you feel challenged? Did you feel accomplished? How much clout, how much status did you have in the job? These are all different moving pieces that every job will have different levels of, and we all require different pieces of when we come to work. Like some people really want to feel accomplished. They want a very challenging job. They want to feel like they're always growing. Cool. Other people say they want something chill. They want to show up. They want to work a couple hours. They want to be on Facebook for a couple hours, go home, check out at 5, not have to think about it, spend time with their family. Cool. It depends. It depends what this is for you. Think about the highs and lows, maybe even ranking jobs, right? She recommends even creating a list. What did you really like? Rank them, favorite to least favorite. It sounds simple, but I did these exercises. And if you actually break it down, to me, there's a lot that we can gain from breaking down the elements of the job rather than just the jobs themselves. Another piece that Helen talks about is this idea of money, because obviously we all need money. The point of working a job is to make money, but how much do you really need? And I'm not saying that with any sort of judgment. Some people want a lot of money because they really like to go out and eat a fancy restaurant. Some people really want to drive fancy cars. Cool, more power to you. You're going to need to make more money. And money, what Helen talks about, is often confused with status in the job. So we might not actually like the job. We might not be good at the job, but because it comes with a big paycheck, that price tag to us validates the work when we might actually be much better at something else that down the line, we might actually be able to make more money from if we stuck with it, but it might not have that price tag. It might not be like some big CEO position right from the jump. So think about that and really breaking it down. Again, another exercise is thinking about how much money do you actually need and how much do you actually want? And I'm not saying that's just to feel comfortable, but what do you actually want the money for? Because at some point, there will be a limit when it's just extra and you might actually find a more fulfilling work if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of the paycheck. Maybe not. That's for you to decide. One of the parts of the interview that I think was most enlightening to me was when Helen runs Ali through an exercise where she asks him simply about his job. So Ali's a YouTuber. He also has these online courses. He just released a book. But what was interesting was hearing Helen talk about how she analyzed Ali when he was talking about these things. Because she wasn't just listening to him in what he told her. She was listening for certain things specifically. And these were different feelings when he'd say how he felt in his body. Some things he felt like they really brought him more. They brought him energy. Other things they felt like they didn't. He felt more closed. Writing, he said he felt like he was more closed off. He didn't feel invigorated. But it was working with people, working with his team. He felt like he opened them up. She also said how much she noticed this in his body language. It was everything he wasn't saying. She said she could even feel it when he talked about it, how much more excited he felt talking about these things. The last thing that she looked at were what she called sticky words, were words that came up over and over and over for him. And for myself, when I thought about this, I was like, I should record myself. I should just do this to myself, put on a recorder, ask myself these same questions, and listen to myself back and see if I can kind of run the same perspective that she ran for Ali for myself. And so this wasn't in the interview, but it's something I'm recommending to you that I think could be potentially cool, is to record yourself to yourself. Like put it on your voice notes on your phone, and the questions are in this interview. I can link them below if you want. And it's this idea of listening for what's between the lines, listening for sticky words, which things keep coming up over and over, and then listening to the energy and how you're actually talking about things. You might be self-conscious recording to yourself and trying to like think while you're doing it, but I just thought it was a fascinating exercise, and it was really cool to see someone who I look up to a lot, who I think has a lot of this already figured out, get perspective from someone like Helen, where I think she drew connections he didn't even realize for himself, which is pretty powerful. Point number 3, when you are doing a strengths evaluation exercise or one of these evaluations for yourself, what Helen talks about is changing your environment. In Helen's case, she said she had a friend, and this friend, I don't know London very well, but it sounded like her friend was in this kind of like highfalutin, high-powered, high-rise, 3 eyes, that she did the strength exercise while she was at work in this big view looking out over the wharf or something like that. And then she said it sounded very much like somebody who would work in one of those places. And she's like, I don't think my friend actually feels that way. So she said, hey, could you do this again, but when you're at home? And the evaluation came out completely differently. And I think this is really interesting, is how much our environment actually affects our mentality. And so what Helen recommends is if you're going to do these evaluations, it was like a strengths finder, I think she called it, was to do it in different areas, different locations at different times. Maybe not on the same day, maybe not in the same place. And then coming back and seeing what the similarities are between your answers, because depending on your mood, depending on where you're at, it might skew these different evaluations, and it might not actually give you the accurate answers that you were looking for. Number 4, when it came to transitioning, career advice, she said, don't ask for a mentor, find them, and then follow up. Ali talked about this too. The difficulty is we want a mentor, but it can be a red flag if we go, hey, will you mentor me? Because a lot of times that feels like, oh my God, there's a lot of indefinite work. What she says instead is, if you find someone who you want to be your mentor, someone who's doing what you want to be doing, be more specific. Ask a specific question, and if they do help you, if they give you advice, implement the advice as fast as you can, as effectively as you can, and then follow up. She said that there are people that are way more important, that are more accessible than we think, but the key is in the follow-up and actually implementing the advice. Because people want to feel good. Giving advice feels good, but what doesn't feel good is if you feel like you're wasting your time. And a good sign that someone isn't wasting their time is if you actually take their advice. There's something, I can't explain it, it's happened to me before when people ask me for advice, that if someone says, hey Kia, I took your advice and I implemented, I did XYZ, it makes you more willing and more open to wanting to give more advice to work with that person in the future. And it's on the mentee, or it's on you if you reach out to the mentor, to do the follow-up. Say, hey, it was really great getting coffee. I took the advice you talked about and I did X, Y, and Z in my business. And that will give the person, motivation to want to do it again. If it's a relationship you want to continue, you follow up and then say, I did have a couple questions about 1, 2, 3. Would you mind if we could do this again sometime, or something like that? Something simple. Rather than a big ask, will you be my mentor? You come with one specific thing, you follow up, you implement their feedback, and you can actually create better relationships with people that might feel out of reach if you're willing to approach these strategically and not in like a slimy way, but in a way if you think about what's going to make this as easy as possible for the other person. Something to think about. The last point that Helen made was speak what you seek until you see what you said. This, I think, can be a little bit of a double-edged sword, because there's signs, and I've looked at the research, that saying what we want to do can release some dopamine in our brains that can be a little bit dangerous, because we can get a feeling like we've already done something when we're just talking about doing it. So keep that in mind. But what I liked about this was, if we put whatever we're talking about out into the ether, one, it holds us responsible. Now it's out there, says, okay, I talked about this, now I need to follow up, I need to do it. But more than that is if people see that, it gives them the opportunity to help us, that maybe they aren't connected to us. What Hal talks about is it's normally people not in our direct network that are the most helpful. It's mostly people, I think it's like second or third connections or whatever it's called. I forget the word for it, but it's not going to be your direct friends. It's going to be like a little bit outside that. Your acquaintances that might see you're doing something and say, hey, actually, I don't do that, but I was just working on a project with somebody over here, and say, hey, Kia, I saw that you're doing this writing thing. I was actually just working with this writing coach, this creative writing person. Let me put you in touch. It seems cool. And so there's something about speaking it out, putting it out into the ether that is powerful. Now, don't get that confused as actually doing the work, because obviously that's different, but putting it out there and giving other people the opportunity to help you. Like I said, we're social animals. We're intrinsically wired to feel good when we help others. So take advantage of that, not in a weird way, but to, again, capitalize on your opportunities, put your mission and your ideas and what you're seeking out into the world. So to wrap this video up, a couple things we talked about was, one, your highs and lows. What's the through line between the jobs that you did before that you liked? What didn't you like? Two, thinking about money. Why do you need it? How much? And what do you actually need it for? 3, if you're going to do a strengths find or any sort of evaluation, do it multiple times, do it in different locations. Number 4, instead of looking for a mentor and asking, will you be my mentor, find people that are doing things, interesting things that you want to be doing, reach out to them, be specific, make it as easy as possible for them to say yes, and then follow up and show how you've actually implemented their advice. And last but not least, speak what you seek till you see what you said, put what you're doing out into the ether, because people will help you more than you might think. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll check you in the next one. Peace.